To make this lovely dress, you need my Frocks and Frolics Megan pattern. You need 2 types of fabric for lining and outer, a little bit of lace and 3 cover buttons. First of all, you want to fold both fabrics over so just one pattern piece fits on, and that means you have 4 layers, both of them on the fold, and that'll save you a lot of time cutting out. Make sure that you have the fold exactly on the edge of the pattern. Now you can see that's my pattern already, lining and front. Now we go on to cut the back. Exactly the same applies. We fold over the fabric, we put both folds on top of each other, place the pattern piece on top and cut it out. Once you've done that, you also want to cut out the pockets. We need 2 pockets, 2 times shell, 2 times lining. And the fantastic news is that you will have lots of fabric left. Here you can see how we have now the front and the back with the linings. Now we want to make the pockets first. Put the lining on top of the pocket and then we're going to sew them together, leaving a gap of about 2 centimeters. Take your time going around the curves, and actually if you're a beginner you might want to put a few pins in if you're an absolute beginner, just to make sure it can't move. Don't forget to lock in your stitches. Now you need to cut back the seam allowance and snip your curves. Once you've done that, you're ready to turn the pocket inside out. Put your fingers in and start at the point furthest from you, and then pull your pocket through. The next step is the ironing. Now ironing is not that easy. You really need to work out all the curves in a kind of rolling motion with your fingers to make sure that you get everything out. Now that that's done, fold over the flap and give that a good press as well. That is just brilliant so that you know which line to stitch on. Now go on a jersey stitch on your sewing machine. That makes it look more like an embroidery thread, and then keeping the same distance from the edge, whatever you feel comfortable with. I think I'm doing about 3 millimeters here. And you go all the way until you've just covered that iron mark that you've just done. Now we're going to position our pocket. So fold your front in half, place your pocket on top, and it's up to you where you want to put it. Mine are very low. You could put them a bit higher or at a slant, and you want to pin them in place. Just 2 pins will do. Make sure you don't catch the lower fabric, and then you open the whole lot back out. And you want to take the next pocket and you place it down, right sides facing exactly on the other pocket. Flip the front over so that the seam allowances are on top of each other, and then simply pin this pocket through. When you open this out, you've got them in exactly the right position, and that's such a brilliant trick. Now we want to top stitch all the way around. Again, I'm using the triple stitch, which looks a little bit like an embroidery stitch. Make sure you move round with a curve and lift the presser foot, and then you've got a lovely, lovely little pocket. Now the pocket still rises up there, and I'm going to stitch across there just to keep that from happening. And there you can see this won't go anywhere. Now we're ready to do our cover button. Put a running stitch around a circle that is bigger than your cover button, obviously, and if you bought a pack there will be a pattern in there for you. Then you pull that thread, you take the second part of the button and place it over the top, And then before you press it down, take a needle and work your way all the way around. Make sure that there are no pleats and that it's really nicely done. Press down hard, cut off your thread, and your button is finished and ready to sew on. To get the right position, fold your pocket in half. I do it with a little crease, that's usually enough. Secure your thread and then sew your button on. And possibly I could have sewn it on before I put it on, but do whatever feels better for you. Now we're going to finish the front. Put the lining over the top, right sides facing, and pin around the armhole, the neck hole, and the other armhole. Leave open the shoulder. I'm also going to mark the point to which I sew. I just use a pencil. Actually, I just can't be bothered to get my tailor's chalk. It's all the way downstairs. So now sew all the way around. Again, seam allowances are 1 centimetre. Take your time going round the curve. Really work the fabric. One can never really see it, but I actually apply a lot of force with my fingers to the needle plate as I'm going along. When you come down the front, I'm actually going backwards and forwards on the last stitch. Now if you've got a mechanical machine, you can do that. If you've got an electronic machine, you can't. In that case, just reduce your stitch length to maybe 1.2, just to make sure that there's no fraying, because we're going to cut right into that point in a minute. Now snip all your curves and cut right into the point, and that's why it's so important to go backwards and forwards or use a really small stitch length. Now we're going to turn the whole lot inside out, so we've got our front and back. There you go. Now all I need to do is iron this really well. And again, the same thing applies. You really need to work out all the curves in that rocking motion. You just have that seam allowance in between your fingers and you move backwards and forwards to just get it right. And once I've ironed it, I've also top stitched it and put the last button on. Same way we've done the pockets, so I don't need to show it again, I think. Now we want to close the shoulders, and the front shoulder is basically inserted into the back shoulder. So you put your fingers in, grab the front shoulder and pull it through to the other side. And now we just move it right into the corner, and you use a pin for that, and then secure it. And also on the other side, use a pin to really push it into that corner and then pin it. Now we want to sew across, starting at the seam. And you can see me do that there. I'm only going from seam to seam because I don't want to cut off my secure thread. Next we want to cut the corners off, and you could also cut a little bit of the seam allowances back so that they're a bit more staggered. And when you pull that out, you get a really lovely shoulder. Next we're going to do the side seams. Now this is dead easy. Just fold it all out, put the shell fabric and the lining fabric on top. Make sure that your seam allowances on the underarm seam are facing downwards and that they're on top of each other, and then just sew it down. This is so easy. There are such complicated methods of doing this, and for a beginner or anyone that wants to do it really quickly, this is a brilliant way of doing it. Now I'm also going to top stitch all the way around my armhole and the neck hole, and if you're an absolute beginner and you have trouble keeping your distances, then I would leave this out. But if you are quite good and you've got a bit of feeling for your sewing machine and where the stitches go, then this is really great, and it makes it look so much more professional. Now I've also overlocked that seam, but if you haven't got an overlocker or serger, you can just use the pinking shears. Now the next thing is to do the hem. I just turn it in 1 centimeter and then up 1 centimeter, so it's very easy, and I don't actually pin this. I find that it's easier to not pin it. I've got my seam allowance on the needle plate. Just turn it in and keep it on that seam allowance, and then stitch very close to your fold that you've put in, and it gives you a really lovely seam like that. Pins do get in the way. Now don't do this at home, children. I've used my scissors because as before my tailor's chalk was downstairs, but in an ideal world, please mark it with tailor's chalk, and then you want to reduce it another centimeter from the total length, and that will just make that little bit of lace sit perfectly. So make sure that you put the lace on that side of the lining where you can see the seam, and then facing upwards. So I've stitched it on now. Next step, checked that it was alright, then I've overlocked it, and I'm now just top stitching the lining down, and that makes it nice and firm, the edge, and a bit more professional than just leaving it hanging, and the dress is finished. I hope you've learned a few techniques how you can make a very simple dress but make it look as if it's come out of a really expensive shop somewhere. They look complicated, but really they're not. And don't forget, the link to the pattern is underneath the video, and you can get it from Etsy.com. Thank you very much for watching.